Hello and welcome to the JSA Studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with another Detroit Lions video. Today we're going to be talking about the offensive line, going position by position, as well as talking about the depth and who ultimately I believe will make the roster. And now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. So we're going to start off this video by talking about the offensive tackles, specifically Penei Sewell, and then we're going to get into Taylor Decker next. For my money, Penei Sewell is, in fact, the best right tackle in the NFL and a top 5 offensive lineman regardless of position. This offseason, he signed a 4-year, $112 million contract extension, making him, I believe, at the time, the highest paid offensive tackle in the NFL. I believe Tristan Wirfs has surpassed him since then. Either way, he was completely worth the money. His contract, unlike Jared Goff's, is actually a little bit more team-friendly. Hypothetically, they would be able to add a void year onto the end of it to spread out the cap hit a little bit more if they wanted to. They could also restructure it and clear money that way. Either way, this is someone who I believe is going to be a perennial Pro Bowler and perennial All-Pro candidate. This is one of the best players in the NFL. Actually, in the NFL top 100, I think he was ranked 22nd or 23rd, somewhere around there, and I think he is underrated. I believe you could make an argument that he is a top 10 player in the NFL regardless of position. And to be entirely honest with you, with Jason Kelce out of the league now, he has retired, I think there's a definitive possibility he's the best offensive lineman in the NFL. And in fact, according to Pro Football Focus, that is the case. He finished with a 92.8 rating, which was the highest of any qualified offensive lineman, regardless of positions. That includes guards and centers. Also, we'll get to him a little bit later, but Frank Ragnow was PFF's #1 center this past season as well. All in all, as a first pick for Brad Holmes, as a culture-defining player, Penei Sewell is that guy. I think he is well on his way to being a Hall of Fame caliber offensive lineman, and with Taylor Decker signing his own contract extension this year, I believe there's a definitive possibility he may go down as the greatest right tackle in the history of the NFL. Taylor Decker is our starting left tackle, and he has been someone that has played at either a flat-out and straight-up Pro Bowl caliber level or a borderline Pro Bowl caliber level for the majority of his career. He has dealt with injuries at times. However, he is someone that is just flat out and straight up one of the most underrated players in the NFL. He is ridiculously good. He signed his own contract extension this year, 3 years, $60 million, $20 million a year, which is 7th in terms of highest ranking for left tackles in the NFL. Even though, in my opinion, he did take a step back this year from earlier points in his career as he is getting older. He is 31, and because of that, it would not shock me if there was a little bit in a decline of play, especially considering that his game was not particularly defined as something that you would say is athleticism based, but it's more so power and length based, which you would think would mean that he would have more longevity. However, with offensive linemen, that's actually just not the case. Typically, the players that last the longest along the offensive line are the most athletic. Case in point, Trent Williams. Case in point, Lane Johnson. Case in point, Jason Kelce. And I can give you a multitude of other examples in terms of the most athletic offensive linemen being the ones that end up lasting the longest, whereas the guys that win with technique and power, as opposed to having that great athleticism, generally start to fade out once they get out of their early 30s. So when you look at Taylor Decker's contract, it's actually remarkably team-friendly. They can effectively get out of it for basically no real penalty after 2025. Now, I don't think necessarily they're going to want to move on from him after 2025. Again, it depends upon how much the play falls off as he gets older. If it falls off at all, maybe it doesn't. Maybe he's one of the rare guys that can be an exception to a general rule, so to speak. PFF did, in fact, actually have Taylor Decker ranked as the 8th best offensive tackle in the NFL this past season. And PFF is generally correct. However, I don't know how they came to that conclusion, given that he did, in fact, give up, or is at least credited with giving up 8 sacks. I don't know if he actually gave up 8 sacks or not. Those statistics often come with a shocking amount of nuance in terms of who they credit sacks to. However, I do remember him getting beat relatively consistently, especially when lined up against Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys. However, Micah Parsons is the kind of player that, generally speaking, nobody can really stop him. So that's not the worst thing in the world. Moving on to the guards, we have Graham Glasgow and Kevin Zeitler, who is replacing Jonah Jackson, who I was tremendously sad to see walk away. However, it's not the end of the world, given that we did, in fact, get Kevin Zeitler to replace him. I do believe that Jonah Jackson will be missed a little bit. Not so much as if we had to replace Jonah Jackson with anyone other than Kevin Zeitler. However, I don't think Kevin Zeitler is an upgrade over Jonah Jackson, especially when you factor age into the conversation. I think they're practically the same player, just inverted. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is Jonah Jackson is an elite run blocker and kind of a average to honestly below average pass blocker. Kevin Zeitler is a below average to average run blocker and an elite pass blocker for the position. You also enter the fact that Graham Glasgow is not particularly that good of a run blocker as well. I think he's better than Kevin Zeitler, but Jonah Jackson was putting in work in the run game. He was at times very bad in the passing game, which is not going to be a problem with Kevin Zeitler. However, I do think the offensive line didn't get worse. I just think it got maybe slightly worse at run blocking and slightly better at pass blocking, and then it's the same level of offensive line. It's just slightly different than it was last year. However, Kevin Zeitler is in fact a stopgap and likely will not be on this team next year. As far as Graham Glasgow goes, he is also kind of a stopgap. Like, he's an older player. He played tremendously well this past season. I thought he played like a Pro Bowl caliber guard this past year, and he was ranked 8th on the PFF rankings. Kevin Zeitler was ranked 15th, and Jonah Jackson was like 34th or something like that, which I just fundamentally disagree with that assessment from PFF. So according to PFF, this was a massive upgrade. Kevin Zeitler's old as hell, and at some point there's going to be a fall off. Is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year? Is it just not going to happen and he's going to retire? I don't know. Kevin Zeitler is a phenomenal football player and has been for almost a decade at this point. He did kind of struggle early on in his career, from what I'm surmising. I think he came into the league in 2012. But he's been a very, very good football player for a very long time. And I don't necessarily see him completely falling off the map. However, this is someone that was kind of a stopgap when they lost out on Jonah Jackson. Again, you could certainly do worse than Kevin Zeitler. All that being said, to be entirely honest with you, if they ended up just drafting Christian Mahogany in the 5th or 6th round, whenever they drafted him, I don't remember, and they just ended up starting him, then I would have been completely fine with that, because I had a top 75 grade on Christian Mahogany. Loved him coming out of Boston College. I thought he was plug-and-play starter in the NFL, and the NFL disagreed with me, which is not the first time they've done that. I've been right sometimes. They've been right sometimes. Well, they've been right more often than I've been right, which is why they're in the NFL, and I'm sitting here just telling you what I think. Last player on the starting offensive line here is the best center in the NFL, Frank Ragnow. And he is the best center in the NFL, I think, right now. I think you can make an argument for Creed Humphrey. And I kind of go back and forth on who I honestly think is better. But I'm going to be a little bit of a homer right now with the Lions. I think Frank Ragnow is the best center in the NFL. I think he got snubbed from first team All-Pro this past season, and I think he is absolutely going to be somebody that needs to be considered a first team All-Pro heading into this season. Again, barring injury, which he has dealt with injuries in his career, and I hope that he doesn't have to deal with them this year, because I want the Lions to go and win the Super Bowl like their roster is constructed to do. So I want Frank Ragnow to be healthy. All in all, he has a tremendous mix of power, agility, and the ability to work to the second level of the defense and potentially even beyond that. When you watch him, he moves people off the offensive line. He is a tremendous football player who is well on his way to being talked about as an all-time great at the position. Moving along to the depth along the offensive line, these are the players that I believe would be the backups at each position, so to speak, right now. The backup at left tackle would most likely be Giovanni Manu. The backup at left guard, or one of the guard positions, would probably be Coyote Ashika. The other backup for the guard position would be Christian Mahogany. Dan Skipper is very likely to continue in his role as that sixth offensive lineman that they bring in for, 5-6 snaps a game. And I also believe he's very likely to be the true sort of backup at the right tackle position. Kobe Sorsdahl, I think, is a depth piece. I do believe he also has a little bit of flexibility from tackle to guard. I believe he played tackle in college, but the general consensus was that he was going to come out and be a guard at the next level. Michael Neese is the backup center. Now, he's not really the backup center. If Frank Ragnow were to get hurt, Graham Glasgow, the man pictured on the screen right now, would actually slide over to center, and I think they would bring in one of Coyote Ashika or Christian Mahogany to come in and play the left guard position. There is, in all honesty, not a whole lot of depth here. I don't particularly feel great about anybody coming off the bench here. I think Giovanni Manu and Christian Mahogany are both players that are going to be starting caliber offensive linemen in the NFL at some point during their career. I mean, Giovanni Manu is just a specimen of a human being, a fantastic athlete for the position, someone that could potentially end up being the replacement for Taylor Decker once we get towards the tail end of that Taylor Decker contract and they can cut it and save like $12 million. That is something that I could see happening. Christian Mahogany, I think flat out and straight up, will likely be the starter at one of the guard positions next year. This year, I do think he will be able to come off the bench and be a guard, but I don't know how much the coaching staff is going to want him to do that, which is why I said it'll either be him or Coyote Ashika, who is a little bit more veteran in the league, to end up being the first guy off the bench along the interior. When it comes to the actual depth chart, everybody knows what the starting five is going to be. Taylor Decker at left tackle, Graham Glasgow at left guard, Frank Ragnow at the center position, Kevin Zeitler at right guard, and Penei Sewell, the All-Pro, at right tackle. The backups, however, would be a little bit more interesting, I guess, but this is probably how it shakes out. You have Giovanni Manu, Coyote Ashika, Graham Glasgow as the backup center, Mahogany and Skipper, with Sorsdahl being the 9th offensive lineman kept on the team. I do think someone like Michael Neese or perhaps someone else might be a candidate for the practice squad to get elevated if the case that Graham Glasgow or Frank Ragnow ends up getting hurt and is out for a couple weeks or, God forbid, the whole season. But I think it's unlikely that he makes the roster outright. I think these 9 players are likely to be just the players that make the roster. Sorsdahl is the one that I would put on the bubble, so to speak, with someone like Michael Neese. So I don't know, though. But that's how I see the position playing out. I think they're going to keep 9 offensive linemen with maybe another 1 or 2 on the practice squad. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. So at this point, I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.